you check your bank account, and somehow it feels like your money disappears faster than ever, even though your paycheck still arrives on time and looks almost the same as it did before. You're working the same hours, doing the same job, and maybe even carrying more pressure than before, but your money feels tighter and your daily life feels less comfortable than it used to. Groceries cost more, rent keeps climbing, gas drains your wallet faster, and even a simple dinner outside can feel like a small financial decision instead of an easy part of normal life. And that's what makes this so frustrating, because no one officially announced that your salary got worse, yet every month your budget tells you that something clearly changed. So what's actually happening here, and why does your paycheck feel smaller without anyone cutting your pay, lowering your hours, or telling you that you've been pushed backward financially? The answer is not one dramatic event, but a quiet combination of rising costs, slow wage growth, and deeper economic shifts that gradually make your money feel weaker over time. And once you see how those changes build on each other, it becomes much easier to understand why so many people feel like they're working hard but moving nowhere at all. The first thing to understand is simple. Your salary is not just about the number written on your paycheck, it's about what that number can still buy after real life takes its cut. If you earn $3,000 a month, that number may look steady on paper. But if rent, food, transportation, and bills all rise faster than your income, that same paycheck becomes less useful. This is why two people can earn the exact same salary in different years and still live very different lives, because prices change, and what money buys today is not what it bought before. A lot of people hear the word inflation and tune out, but inflation is just a simple way of saying that prices across everyday life keep rising over time, often without you noticing immediately. At first it feels small. Maybe eggs cost a little more, your utility bill creeps higher, and your regular grocery trip feels slightly heavier, but those small increases pile up month after month. And here's the painful part. Your salary does not automatically rise just because your life gets more expensive, which means your paycheck can stay the same while your lifestyle quietly gets squeezed. Your employer may give raises once a year, or maybe not at all, but stores, landlords, insurance companies, and service providers are not waiting politely for your income to catch up. So even when you do get a raise, it often feels less exciting than it should, because part of that increase is already being swallowed by higher costs before you even notice it. This is where purchasing power matters, and that phrase sounds technical, but it really just means how much your money can actually do for you in the real world. If your paycheck rises by 2%, but your rent, groceries, and transportation rise by 5%, then your income increased on paper, but your actual financial strength still went backward. That is why many people say they are earning more than before, while also feeling like life is harder, because the real value of their money has been quietly shrinking underneath them. And inflation does not hit every part of life equally, which makes the problem even more painful, because some of the fastest rising costs are the things you cannot simply choose to avoid. Housing, food, healthcare, childcare, transportation, and utilities are not luxury purchases. They are the basic framework of ordinary life. And when they rise, your financial pressure rises with them. You can delay buying a new phone, skip a vacation, or cancel a subscription, but you still need a place to live, food to eat, power in your home, and gas in your car. That means the parts of your budget that matter most are often the parts with the least flexibility, which is why rising costs feel so personal and so hard to escape. Rent is one of the clearest examples, because in many places housing costs have risen much faster than wages, and once rent eats a bigger share of your income, everything else becomes harder. A few $100s more in monthly rent might not sound catastrophic at first, but that extra pressure reduces what you can save, what you can spend, and how much breathing room your life has. The same thing happens with groceries, because food inflation does not always feel dramatic in a headline, but it feels very real when the same cart costs more and still seems less full. You start noticing that small habits change. Maybe you stop buying certain items, delay eating out, switch brands, or check prices more closely, not because you want to, but because you have to. And this is where people begin to feel something deeper than stress, because it no longer feels like an isolated price increase. It feels like everyday life itself is getting more expensive to maintain. Now let's add another layer, because even without inflation, wage growth itself has often been slower and weaker than people assume, especially for ordinary workers in many industries. Businesses usually try to keep labor costs under control, and salaries are one of the biggest ongoing expenses they manage, so raises are often cautious, delayed, or smaller than workers hope for. From a company's point of view, that protects margins and keeps costs predictable, but from a worker's point of view, it means your income often lags behind the reality of your monthly bills. And that lag matters more than most people realize, because even a short period of weak wage growth can leave you behind if prices keep rising while your pay barely moves. This is why someone can stay loyal to the same job for years, gain more experience, take on more responsibility, and still feel like their financial life is not improving the way it should. Part of the reason is that raises are often based on company budgets, internal rules, and negotiation strength, not on whether your landlord raised the rent or groceries became more expensive. So the system that determines your paycheck is often disconnected from the system that determines your cost of living. And that gap is where a lot of frustration begins. There is also a wider economic shift behind this, because over time many workers have seen productivity rise without seeing equal wage growth rise beside it in a matching way. In simple terms, people and businesses are often producing more value than before, but workers do not always receive a larger share of that value in their paychecks. A bigger share of gains can flow toward executives, shareholders, investors, and owners, while regular employees see smaller increases that do not fully reflect how much the economy has expanded. That creates a strange feeling in daily life, where the world seems richer, companies seem bigger, and prices seem higher. Yet your own finances do not feel stronger or more secure. You can see this in modern city life, where shiny towers, new developments, and expensive stores suggest prosperity, while many ordinary workers feel less financially stable inside that same environment. And when that gap becomes normal, people start blaming themselves, even though a large part of the problem comes from the way income and costs are moving in different directions. Another factor is job competition, because when many people are available for similar work, employers often feel less pressure to raise wages aggressively, even when living costs keep rising around everyone. If workers are replaceable, income growth tends to stay weaker, and that means people can remain employed, work hard, and still feel financially stuck instead of steadily moving ahead. This is part of why the phrase, "good job," does not feel as powerful as it once did. Because having stable work no longer guarantees the level of financial progress people expect. You might be doing everything society told you to do: show up, work hard, stay responsible, avoid unnecessary spending, and still feel like your salary is barely keeping your life in place. That feeling is not random, and it is not simply poor budgeting. Because when the structure around you changes, effort alone cannot always fully protect your financial position. And then there is lifestyle inflation, which is another quieter force that can make raises feel smaller, even when your income genuinely increases over time. Lifestyle inflation happens when your spending rises as your earnings rise. So maybe you move into a nicer place, finance a better car, upgrade your phone, or spend more on convenience. None of those choices are automatically reckless, and many of them feel reasonable, especially when you finally think your income has improved enough to give you a little more comfort. But when those upgrades pile up, they can absorb the very raise that was supposed to help you feel more secure, leaving you with higher expenses and not much extra breathing room. So sometimes the problem is not only that wages are lagging behind prices, but also that modern life constantly pushes people to normalize slightly more expensive versions of everything. That does not mean the answer is to blame yourself for every purchase. It means the financial pressure is coming from both outside forces and the expectations built into ordinary life. Now here is an especially frustrating truth. Inflation slowing down does not mean your life becomes cheap again, and that misunderstanding causes a lot of disappointment. When inflation slows, prices are still rising, just not as quickly as before, which means your rent, food, and bills usually stay high even if the pace of increase becomes slower. So when news headlines say inflation is cooling, many people expect relief, but in reality they often just stop getting worse quite as fast, which is not the same as getting better. That is why people hear positive economic language and still feel confused, because the numbers may be improving in one sense, while their lived experience still feels expensive and restrictive. And once higher prices become the new normal, your salary has to catch up to an already elevated cost of living, which is much harder than simply holding steady from the start. This is also where debt can quietly make the whole situation worse, because when income stops covering everyday life comfortably, borrowing often becomes the tool people use to bridge the gap. At first it may be small: a credit card balance, a payment plan, or financing something that used to be easy to buy outright, but those choices can slowly become part of normal survival. Then interest starts taking a slice of your future income, which means the money you earn next month is already partially spoken for before it even arrives in your account. So now the problem is no longer just that groceries, rent, and utilities cost more. It is also that past financial pressure is still collecting payment from your current paycheck. This is how many people end up feeling constantly behind, not because they are irresponsible, but because each month they are trying to solve both today's costs and yesterday's shortfalls. And when that cycle lasts long enough, it changes the way life feels, because ordinary decisions stop feeling simple and start feeling heavy, strategic, and sometimes even emotionally exhausting. You notice it when filling your tank, renewing insurance, opening bills, buying school supplies, or checking grocery totals, because the pressure is no longer occasional, it becomes part of the routine. That daily pressure can also affect bigger life choices, because people postpone moving out, delay having children, avoid changing jobs, or stay in unhealthy routines simply because money feels too tight. So the problem is not just that your salary buys less at the store, it is that weaker purchasing power slowly reduces your freedom, your flexibility, and your sense of control over life. And this is why the issue feels bigger than math, because it touches pride, stability, identity, and the basic hope that working hard should gradually make life feel more secure instead of more fragile. When that hope weakens, frustration grows, and people start asking a deeper question. Not just why is everything expensive, but why does effort not seem to go as far as it should? Part of the answer is that modern economies reward some skills, industries, and locations far more than others, so two hardworking people can end up with very different financial outcomes. Someone in a high-demand field may see wages rise quickly, while someone equally disciplined in a slower-moving field may barely keep up, even though both are working seriously and responsibly. That creates another painful feeling, because the economy does not always reward effort evenly, and many people feel judged by outcomes shaped partly by forces they do not fully control. Now step back and look at the full picture, because your salary falling behind is usually not the result of one mistake, one bad month, or one poor decision. It is often the combined effect of rising essential costs, uneven wage growth, housing pressure, inflation, debt, weak bargaining power, and a cost of living that keeps outrunning ordinary incomes. Each factor on its own may seem manageable, but together they create the feeling that your money is thinning out, even while you keep showing up and doing what you were supposed to do. That is why so many people say life feels harder now, because in practical terms it often is harder, not always dramatically in one moment, but steadily across many parts of ordinary life. So what should you take away from all this, especially if you have been feeling guilty, confused, or quietly discouraged every time your paycheck seems to disappear too quickly? First, understand that this is not only a personal failure, and it is not always proof that you are careless, lazy, or bad with money just because things feel harder than they used to. Second, once you understand that your real problem is the gap between income and cost of living, you can think more clearly about what actually needs to change. That might mean increasing income, reducing fixed expenses, changing jobs, building better savings habits, or simply becoming more honest about how much your current salary can realistically support. But none of those choices become easier if you misread the problem, because you cannot solve financial pressure well if you keep blaming the wrong cause every single month. And finally, remember the most important point. Your financial life is not defined only by how much money comes in, but by how much that money can still do once real life takes its share. A paycheck can look stable while its real power keeps shrinking, and that is why so many people feel like they are earning money, but not actually moving forward in life. If this breakdown helped you see why your salary feels weaker than it used to, subscribe for more clear, simple explanations about money, work, and the economic forces shaping everyday life.